Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and I just finished one quantum reel, and sure enough I got another one in. I did a quantum iron for Scott, and Matt sent me in a group of bait casters, including this quantum. This quantum is the EX501CX. Not sure what all those letters stand for. The 1, the odd numbering on the end of models, typically means that it's a left-handed cranking reel. This is a bait caster. My guess is the 1990s. The design sort of suggests that, kind of a jelly bean design here. Very similar to what the automobiles in the 1990s were doing after they kind of replaced the round or the rectangular headlights with custom kind of bezels and the like. Well, kind of that design of the era is sort of this. The bait casting model designs have changed over time. This one I would say is in the 1990s, maybe the early 2000s. Well, we're going to tune this reel up for Matt. We'll show you how this reel comes apart, how it's serviced, and how it goes back together again. We'll point out some of the design features in it. And I always like to give it a little test beforehand, and this one seems to be doing fine. Check the spinning, make sure that that's on. Check the free spool release, that clicks back. Check it to make sure it releases the spool. It does. Hold the drags. Well, the drags could be tightened up, but that's okay. They should be left in the off position. Well, typical of these reels, they don't have a lot of drag, but we should be okay with that. And we'll just start taking off the exterior pieces and parts. This one's missing a nut cap, hold down. Those things are impossible to find once you lose them, in the sense that they don't, as a replacement part, very hard to get, particularly on a 25-year-old reel. All right, this comes off in a reverse thread. By reverse thread, it means that it comes off in a clockwise manner. Most of the old adage about righty-tighty and lefty-loosey does not apply to that one. A reverse thread is actually right side turning to the right to remove it. And take pictures along the way now. If you don't have the schematic, I don't have the schematic on this reel, then take pictures so that you remember where the pieces and parts go when it's time to reinstall. We're going to remove the star adjuster in the same way, and as I do that, I'm going to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. If you like fishing reel repair, if you'd like to learn more about fishing reels, how they're designed and how they work, then this is a good channel for you, and subscribing will give you notifications as to when I'm posting new videos, and I try to post frequently. All right, there's one tension washer I took off already. I'm going to take the second tension washer off. I'm going to put them in a cup so that I know that that's the last two pieces on before that adjuster. We have a bearing in here now, and then we have access to 3 of the screws that hold the side plate on. And I'm not quite sure if there's a 4th one. When I did the quantum iron, I had to take this the click release off. I'm not sure if I need to do that here. We'll find out. Oh, this is the override, right? All right. Well, regardless, let's take those 3 off. Those are Phillips head screwdrivers, and the Phillips head that I have can't fit in the slot, so I need to go to a micro screwdriver. It's always good to keep a variety of tools on your bench, and that way you can switch them without kind of letting the project go and then go searching for it and come back and find out that you missed something along the way. Alright, so this is the 3 screws. We'll see if that separates. It seems to have one more piece in here somewhere. So I'm going to grab this. Let's get that screw out of here. I may not have loosened that all the way. Let's see if our case can come off. Well, there's something holding it here. Let's move the let's remove this piece, which will take off the side plate. And then let's see if that's the cause. We're going to remove the spool as well. Sometimes there's a screw or something hanging behind the spool. And it appears that This case will not separate. I'm noticing that there's a small screw here. My bet is that there's going to be a bar associated with that screw. So let's see if that's the other piece that's going to release the case. And that is going to be the piece to release the case. That's a long bar screw, and now our case can come off. So one of the things you want to learn when you do these reels is that you don't force anything. If you force something like that, if you just think, well, maybe it's just stuck grease or something, you start pulling, you're going to crack the case, and well, this reel will be a project reel. The 3 screws that I took out of the side plate are the same, so those 3 screws are going to go into my parts tray. I use a parts tray that's simply the bottom of a fast food container until that one gets all greased up, and then we'll find something else to use. And inside here, well, you get some people from time to time complain a lot about quantum reels because there are a lot of plastic pieces and parts on this. And the first thing I like to do as soon as I open that case up is to take the 2 springs that belong on the yoke and put them safely in my parts tray. It's just too easy to tilt the reel or have something else go on it, and the next thing you know, you're searching for those all over the place. I'm going to take my 2 side plates. I'm just going to leave them at the top of my desk because they're big enough that I won't worry about finding them when it's time to reinstall. We have a bearing on the sleeve next, and then we have that anti-reverse clutch mechanism, and sometimes that comes off with the collar, which it did here. There's a collar on here. Notice on this positioning now, you have 2 different sides to this, or on the sides, well, they're hard to distinguish, but that's the upside. And you need to know that when you go to reinstall, because if you put that downwards on a left-handed reel, it's not going to turn. All right, we have the main gear comes off next. We have the pinion gear, and we have the yoke assembly. And here's what I mean by a lot of plastic. You have the plastic on the back end of this drive shaft, this piece. You have a plastic piece that's driving the worm gear. You have a plastic piece, which is not unusual. You have a plastic piece that serves as the yoke, which moves the gears in and out. We're just going to clean all of these up. Put them off to the side. I have my yoke assembly, and that's because I want to get to the gear shaft. Sometimes there's a bearing under here, and well, you don't want to leave that unoiled if there is a bearing under here. So we're going to grab a Phillips head screwdriver, take those 2 pieces out and see what we have. Sometimes it's a bushing, sometimes it's a bearing. We're going to find out. I leave them right on my desk because, well, I'm going to get right back to putting that in. I just want to check underneath here. And we have a bearing. So you did want to make sure that the drive shaft was removed so that you could take care of that bearing. I'm going to go ahead and oil that. I'm using fishing reel oil. I suggest you do the same. There's a lot of household oils and greases that I find in reels from time to time. Quite honestly, they're designed for the household, not fishing reels. I know people use all kinds of things. They use gun oil and they use other pieces. Fishing reel oil is not that expensive. I highly recommend that you go with the oil. Now, plastic gears don't need to be greased. You can put a little bit of oil on there. By the nature, they are kind of self-lubricating. Just make sure that they're clean, that you do not have any obstructions in those teeth. And particularly with plastic gears, make sure that all the teeth are there and that they're not bent. That's a weak point on the gears. The strong point of using a plastic gear is that it's flexible, and if you get hung up, it will flex a little bit versus metal, which will tear up a reel. If you don't go with the plastics, if you prefer the metals, then you better grab your line when you get hung up and manually retrieve it. Do not use the crank side of the reel for that purpose. It's just not going to work well. Okay, we've taken care to clean off the jack. I'm going to oil the bearing that's in the back here. We've cleaned our yoke. Now on the yoke, check for the ramps. There's two sides to a yoke. These have ramps. The ramps always go to the back side. When you're working with your pinion gear, the slotted side of the pinion gear on the face goes towards the spool. I've had reels come in because I've been told that the gears no longer work, that you're cranking but nothing's working, and the pinion gear has been installed backwards. So please. So the ramps go to the back, the slot goes towards the spool. That's the proper configuration of your pinion gear. And now we can just simply slide that back on over the two studs. Just need to move the yoke to the proper position. You need to make sure when you're doing this that in the resting position you can see that your metal part of the jack and the plastic part of the yoke mesh there. That's the proper position. Okay, we're going to just check our gear system now. You want to check the gear. You have a couple of pieces on the back. You can take those off. Make sure they're clean. They are. This is the click ratchet that's going to release the gear. Once the trip is in place, then you have a backing washer. And now we can just remove this. There's probably just one drag washer in there. Based on what I was feeling in terms of drag pressure, I can't imagine there's more than one. Here it is. That's a nice, thick, heavy coated one. It has a little bit of buildup on there. So you can see that there's some worn, and maybe that's a little bit of what was contributing to that slip as well. I'm going to take a cotton swab and just try to get that off of there. Probably some light greasing or something. I'll use the paper towel as well to clean that channel. And I noticed that there's some stuff on the drag washer too. Now if you wanted to, and I'm just going to use this as an example, you could use a flat microfile just to scuff it up a little bit. You don't want to get aggressive and tear it up, but if you want to break that little seal, you can see the old grease is coming off of that. Kind of maybe you can see it. It's a little tough, but I'm just using the edge of a microfile to free that grease up. That dried grease is a detriment to the drag performance. Check the teeth on your main gear. Make sure they're all uniform, that they're not chipped or cracked or broken or distorted, because your main gear will give you noise if that's the case. And then just like we did with the pinion gear, get a good amount of grease on there. You don't have to get grease in every tooth. And I am using a fishing reel grease here. I'm using Penn Precision reel grease. This is a quantum reel. I had a comment come in on the other quantum reel that I did that they like the quantum hot sauce. That's fine. If you want to use the manufacturer's reel grease, that's okay. I don't have a preference for fishing reel greases. Just use greases that are designed for fishing reels. But other than that, if you want to use a manufacturer's, go right ahead. And if you're okay with the performance, well, that's okay too. Just use whatever you like, but make sure it's a fishing reel grease. I set this for the top up so that I know that I have the correct anti-reverse going on this. There's a collar that rides inside. You do not oil or lubricate the collar on this. And now we just go over to the bearing, sits next. Then there's a small bearing shield that goes on after that. When I put that bearing on, we're going to oil that bearing. It's a shielded bearing, it's not a sealed bearing, so oil will work its way in there. And we'll let that sit just as it is. Okay, there's not much more left here but to close that case up. So we're going to go back and find those two springs that belong to this. I'm going to seat those in the cups that go along with that yoke. And then we can take our side plate. This is our Okay, so I'm looking at this, and that spring is detached, and that detached spring tells me that we needed to remove this screw when we took that side plate cover off. Remember I said before I was unsure whether that needed to be the case? Well, that's the case. All right, let's go reinstall that. That's actually a bonus part of this service then. You're going to see how to do that. Push that through. Okay, we've taken time to reinstall the flipper switch spring. We've also nested the two springs that belong on the yoke, and it's time to close this case up then. So we're going to note that there's a hexagonal indentation in the case here that corresponds with the anti-reverse clutch. And if you go to install the case and you're having a little bit of trouble, make sure that that nests inside here. You may need to turn the main shaft to do that. All right, we're going to just take that side case, make sure that the flipper switch piece comes through, nest it, and now we have a little bit of a gap which says we probably have to turn that handle a little bit. There we go. Now you have a nice tight seam on the side plate. And if you're meeting any resistance, do not force any piece. Just take a deep breath, go back out, take a check, make sure that everything is lined up properly and that it just goes in nice and easy. If it's not going in nice and easy, well, chances are you probably did something that caused something in there to bind. So don't work it that way. Patience is a key in real repair. All right, I'm going to take the last of the case screws on this side, put that back in. Then we can put that little switch back on. And we have the screw for that switch. That mounts next. So if you have any questions on this reel or any reel in particular, maybe you're working on one and something's stuck along the way, maybe you started reassembly and can't remember where a piece goes or something, then if you leave that question in the comment section, I will try to answer that for you. All right, we've oiled the bearing behind. We have the other side plate, which just has a magnet and a bearing in it. All you need to do here is to make sure that the magnetic surfaces are clean, which they are. Oil that bearing. And then we want to grab that spool. Now this spool's got line on it. Make sure that you don't trap the line as you go to reinstall that spool. By trapping the line, I mean that it gets caught in the side case on either side. Holding that in. Oh, we got one more piece to do here. We can hold that in anyway. There's that long rod that is the final screw that holds the other side part of this case in. Let's get that back in. Tighten that down. Now we can take our side plate and put that on. This mounts from the top. And there's a little switch down here that makes sure that that stays. Just testing it before we go. In flip switch mode, which is controlled by that spring, this will bounce back up and down. When you flip the lever over to this side, that will stay down and should trip back. So we've got that mechanism correct. All right, so the only thing we want to do now, other than put the exterior pieces on here, is to service the pawl. And I'm going to service the pawl at the moment because I don't want that other piece to get in the way of the handle and all that other stuff. This is a plastic cap. Please be careful when you're working with plastic pieces. Again, some of the fans of the, or some of the detractors, shall I say, of the Quantum is that there's a lot of plastic pieces on here. And as you mentioned, plastic pieces have the advantages. They also have disadvantages. So I've oiled up the pawl, oiled up the worm gear. Go ahead and put that cap back on. And this one you have to kind of do it by yourself here. Make sure that you do not cross strip the threads, and you'll be able to tell if it's not going on easy. Don't grab a screwdriver and try and make it go on. It's just not going to work. And you're going to break the cap, and then you're going to go looking for pieces and parts. There's those two adjuster shim washers here, tension washers I believe they're called. Those go on next. These are not flat washers, don't attempt to flatten them. There's no right or wrong way to put them on, but I kind of put them face to face. That gives you some flexibility in the performance. All right. And then remember, this goes on in a counterclockwise manner because it's a left-handed reel. Next up then is that tension washer. Then our handle. Then the nut, and remember the nut is going to go on reverse threaded as well. Same idea here, do not cross strip on a brass gear shaft. You'll be looking for one. So start the screw with your hand and just finish tightening it once you're comfortable that you've got it done. Now this one didn't have the cap when we went to take it apart, and that's unfortunate. All right, I'm just going to tighten this down. We'll give it a final test here, and then we'll get this one back to Matt to go fishing again. So this is the Quantum, as we mentioned. It's the EX501CX. That's nice performance. Tighten that drag. Yep, get that drag holding nicely now. I'm going to back the drag off just as Matt had it backed off. As you saw, there was some grease and some shining on it, if you will, but that's okay. It'll hold. All right, you want to give it a crank. Make sure that your line guide is moving nice and easily. You want to make sure that there's turning, that you're not feeling or hearing anything obvious in there that may have said that you misaligned something. Let's push down on the free spool, make sure that it spins. Now we put new greases and oils in here. You may need to back that adjuster cap off a little bit. That'll give you a freer spin on your spool, or you can tighten it up. That's all about how you prefer to fish this reel. And we're ready to go. And as I mentioned, the flipper switch now is doing what it needs to do, and then go back into normal operation mode, and it's ready to go. Before we go, I want to thank our first responders and essential personnel and everybody involved in keeping us safe during the pandemic. Truly appreciate all of your efforts and heroism in putting your lives on the line to combat COVID. To all, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.